Hey there, it's Tony here, and welcome to Dumb Leaders Podcast. This is episode 32. It's our first one for 2019. It's still young. 2019 is still very young, but there's a number of things that I want to touch on in today's episode going on right around the world that in many ways are just dumb. So whether it's dumb leaders or whether it's dumb people or whether it's just simply dumb, I want to talk about it. So in today's episode, I'll be talking a little bit about the US shutdown. I will make the proviso that I'm not necessarily an expert on some of this stuff, and from a casual observer looking in, some of it appears to be pretty dumb. I'm also then going to talk a little bit about Brexit. In so many ways, Brexit has been a fascinating thing to observe and research over the last year or so, I guess. But it doesn't seem that we're any closer to any sort of outcome with that particular thing. I'm then going to talk a little bit about Blue Mountains and what the hell has Elon Musk got to do with that. I'll share some insights from the NRL, the Rugby League national competition here in Australia. A bit of an outcry around the NFL on the weekend that I just want to share as well. And then we'll just talk a little bit about relevance and how the world is actually changing, and some of the dumb leaders that we see out there or people making decisions to influence need to change and need to evolve. And unless when they start to learn some of those messages, I think we're just going to continue to see some really dumb mistakes made. So let's talk firstly about the US shutdown. So we're now past, at the time of recording this, I think it's just past the 30 days. And to be, in all honesty, I don't really understand how parts of the government can just shut down, how parts of the government have to keep coming up for funding, but that is the case that we see in America. So apart from the fact that maybe I don't necessarily understand that concept, I would have thought that all parts of the government were just funded and not having to have their budgets, I suppose, approved on an ongoing basis. I find that quite fascinating. But the reality for me is that a healthy ego is one thing, but when it's out of control, it's another. Now, as American government workers affected by the shutdown bunker down, and in many instances are being reported to find other ways to get food on the table and to pay the bills. So this embargo is affecting up to 80,000 government workers. These are real people, real Americans that are being impacted by this government shutdown. And this government shutdown shows no signs of being finished, of being concluded. Both parties seem to be completely so far apart that to me it's almost incomprehensible that they're going to come together and meet to get the government functioning again, I guess. And it's just really crazy. And in some ways I'm thinking, are we seeing the final death nails in the Trump presidency? I don't know. Are we seeing the final throes of democracy? You know, when we think about it, when governments can be held almost to ransom in a situation like this, is that really a good place for us to be? I don't know. Perception on the president is that he would like, my perception on the president and many others I'll throw in, is that he would like nothing more than be the ultimate decision maker, the ultimate king. And from what his behaviour and behaviour has constituted, that he struggles to build and create consensus. And I think that any politician that can unite people behind them and create something that's for the better good, not just for the select few of who they may or may not represent, I think will be the politician. It needs to be the politician of the future. The perception is that while making the America great again is indeed a mantra, in many people's eyes it's about making America Trump. And I'm not sure whether this government shutdown is really good for what the president is ultimately stating as his outcome and his aims. Struggling to see how this helps America at all, in all honesty, and hurting your own people, in words, is just dumb. Now, you know, history's full of despots and kings and tyrants that have held their people ransom in many, many ways, in despicable means. History's littered with horrific events, and I know it's a really long straw to bow to compare, but in many ways, the American people and the American government, potentially in so many people's eyes, are being held to ransom. So, who knows? I think hurting your own people is done. It's about building consensus. It's about getting everyone behind the president and the government, the whole of government opportunity. So the US shutdown, really dumb. When it will conclude, who knows? But let's talk about Brexit. Now, as an outsider looking in, to me, this is just all kinds of dumb. First up, the people of the UK vote to leave the EU, the European Union. And then they've got to obviously work to get a plan so that they can exit the union and do so in a way that's positive, as positive as can be, I guess, for both the European countries and for the UK itself. But in so many ways, it appears that the people of the UK have had a change of heart. Now, I'm not in the UK, and you can only read what's being put up in the press, but it would appear that the people of UK may have had a change of heart, and politicians aren't necessarily working together to get the deal done. It keeps getting rejected, whatever's being put up. Now, there doesn't seem at this stage to be a viable way forward for me. As I said, I'm a casual observer. I'm not in depth with the Brexit, but it does seem that the way forward just doesn't seem to be a viable option. So, except maybe taking the vote back to the people and allowing, and maybe to rescind the vote. I don't know. That's the way it seems to be heading, and I guess there's going to be a number of people that eat some humble pie in that case. Well, the question is, will the UK ever leave the EU? Hard to say, really. My guess is no. And it's just hard to fathom that the cost in financial terms and reputation. So Brexit, all kinds of dumb. All kinds of dumb is happening with Brexit. Let's talk Blue Mountain. So a group of senior road tunnelling experts here in Australia have rubbished entrepreneurs Elon Musk's claim that he can build a 50-kilometre loop through the Blue Mountains for about $1 billion. With one of them describing it as Alice in Wonderland. Now, let me be quite clear. This is just a tweet that went out from someone here in Australia, which Elon responded to and provided a cost of building a tunnel through the Blue Mountains in line with what's happening apparently in Los Angeles and other, I think Chicago was the other city that was potentially named, based around the costings for those projects. So Elon has pretty much said that he can do this for $1 billion. So now, engineer and hydrologist Philip Pells, one of the senior personnel behind Sydney's Harbour and Eastern Distributor Tunnels. So he's got some background, this guy. So, he is an expert. Said Mr. Musk's prediction was totally out of the ballpark. Okay. He's out by at least a factor of 10. Okay. Or up to a factor of 50, the tunnelling expert of 40 years said. The difficulties of this sort of project are substantial. I'm not trying to knock the guy, but he's not going to be able to build a tunnel through the Blue Mountains here in Australia for $1 billion. Now, let me just say here, before poo-pooing the guy and ridiculing what he ultimately said. So this is a guy. Now one guy's got a track record of building tunnels here in Australia, right? And the other guy has got a track record of disruption, building electric cars, and funnily enough, challenging boundaries. And incidentally, one of those boundaries that he challenged was sending the SpaceX rocket with the Tesla Roadster out into space. So this guy's got a bit of a history now of stretching the accepted parameters around engineering and what can actually be achieved. So to me, before you go out and you ridicule someone that can potentially help us achieve some great stuff, a little bit disruptive, a little bit different, if he can claim that he can build that tunnel through the Blue Mountains for $1 billion, let's sign that contract now. Let's not poo-poo him. Let's not protect an industry that, ultimately has just become really expensive here in Australia. Anyone building roads here in Australia, even a casual observer of people building roads, understands that building a road is pretty expensive here and pretty lengthy. So if we've got a guy that can do it quicker, faster, and safer, why not? Let's have a look at it. So let's not poo-poo. That's pretty dumb. My money would be on the dude that's changing the boundaries and not one that's trying to protect their own piece of pie just quietly. So let's have a look at the National Rugby League. Now, the National Rugby League has got this amazing habit of creating negative out of the positive. Whatever it is, it's a great game. It can be a great game. It can be even greater. But we keep getting dragged through the mud through this thing called player behaviour. And we've had some real negative press over here on videos that have been released of some star players doing some pretty ridiculous things just quietly. So some have been sex tapes, another was just an obvious piss take, trying to make players within their group laugh and create something that's funny. I don't know. There's a whole phenomenon out there with young players doing some pretty stupid, dangerous stuff just to try and get a laugh out of a group of mates, young players with energy to burn. And in today's age, the temptations are huge. Let's do a quick Snapchat. Let's do a quick video. Let's get a laugh. It's this whole dopamine hit stuff. Let's try and make ourselves popular. Let's get likes. Let's get laughs. So, and there's been a lot of talk about the blaming here. Whoever does, there's talk of blaming the person that's in the video. That's pretty dumb thing to be doing just quietly. Whoever took the video has been a bit of constant lock water cooler talk. And there's been a concerted campaign to expose the ones that are sharing the videos. And, but ultimately the way that I look at it is that everyone in this sad, sorry tale shares the blame. Now, the only advice that I can do is abstinence, guys. Don't do it. It seems pretty stupid. It seems pretty pointless. Abstain from it, and that way things don't get out. You don't have to pay hush money. Whatever the other codes do that keeps this out of the press, I don't know, because I'd imagine that most codes here in Australia are facing the same dilemma. However, just don't do it. And while we're at it, the NRL CEO, a guy called Todd Greenberg, had a stern talking to with the club captains on player behaviour when he came back to work after the Christmas break. So that'll work, Toddy. Absolutely. Now, just quietly, the increasing amount of education that these players get, they should already know better. They should already know better. And a stern talking to from the CEO or the president is not going to change that. Ultimately, the change has to come within them and within the groups themselves and hold themselves accountable. They've got to create a culture where they want to be doing the right thing, not just seen to be doing the right thing. Now, a lot of rugby league players do a lot of work in the community, at hospitals, Indigenous communities, supporting their cultures. They do fantastic work, and it's unheralded, most of it. But the reality is this dumb stuff keeps dragging the game down. So they just have to, they just need to learn to behave. They just have to behave and want to behave in line with the new standards that are there. And when they do that, maybe all this good stuff will become the fodder for the press and not just the crap that they keep being able to find. So just while we're on the concept of positive press, the NFL game, the NFC Championship game between the New Orleans Saints and the Los Angeles Rams was decided, well, not necessarily decided, but impacted severely by a no call, a call that wasn't made during the course of the game, which should have been. And it was, and if you understand the game of NFL, if the correct call had been made, it would have helped the Saints hold on to the football, go through a set of downs, wind the clock down, maybe kick a field goal. and the game was pretty much sealed. But instead, what happened was the Rams ended up getting the ball. So the simple fact here is the call wasn't made on the field, right? So I presume that if the call had been made, as we saw right throughout that game, the opposition has the opportunity to challenge if the call was right or wrong. But when the call isn't made, there's nothing that can be challenged. If I'm, and that makes common sense. It's not like you want people to be refereeing via the TV or the video. So a call has to be made to be challenged. So in this case, the call wasn't made. And it was pretty blatant. And looking at some of the experts, there are up to 3 or 4 different infringements in this one particular incident. So the fact here is that everyone else could see it. Everyone else could see it except the officials on the field. So that's the reason why the call wasn't made. Now, it's ended up being a costly no decision with the New Orleans Saints heading home. So, and that's the fact that there can't be a challenge on a no decision is just ridiculous. The fact that there isn't someone that's scrutinising the video or whatever, giving a tip to the field umpires. I don't know what the answer is. We've got video ref here in Australia, and it conjures up more concerns than what it allays, I think. But in this particular instance, there needed to be a fail-safe, and it wasn't. It was a blatant infringement, and it ended up being a very costly error for one of the teams. So, I wish the LA Rams all the best of luck, I guess, moving into the playoff, the Super Bowl game with those evergreen New England Patriots. So it's going to be interesting. It will be very, very interesting to see what happens in the Super Bowl, whether the Rams are going to be able to match it with the Patriots. The Patriots just seem to have a lot of big-name players that can really pull out when required. Now, finally, the last little thing I just want to touch on, and we're just seeing organisations, some of them really struggle. So we are in an evolving society. We are seeing in so many ways, the concept of equality is just part of our evolution. So whether it's culture, whether it's gender, whatever the race, religion, we're just seeing a continued evolution of what I would call equality. So, and it's impacting people. It's impacting people who aren't evolving with the times. And a classic example came to my attention during the week when the Industrial Relations Minister here in Australia, Kelly O'Dwyer, gave the notice or the intention of resigning and leaving the role. So whoever thought there's a Facebook page here called the Union News Australia. Now, industrial relations and unions don't necessarily go hand to hand. Check back at one of our previous episodes where we've had a conversation about dumb leaders and bad unions. But unions and industrial relations ministers very rarely go hand in hand. So, and whoever thought it was a really good idea to post on the Union News Australia Facebook page to share an image of Kelly O'Dwyer with the words "bye bye bitch" is just so severely out of touch with the general community standards that we want to adhere to. In fact, Craig Emerson, who was Julia Gillard's closest supporter during her time as the Prime Minister here in Australia, says the description of one of the Liberal Party's most senior women as a bitch shows Australia has made no progress on how it treats its female MPs. Now, we won't even go into the bullying aspects around this as well. So I think that statement by Craig Emerson says it all. I understand there is this still element of male leaders out there that don't like females in positions of influence and authority, or they don't like their actions or what they do. And for the record, gentlemen, it's 2019. We should always be looking for the best, to deliver what's best. So whether that be for your nation, for the state, for the organisation, we should be looking for the best to deliver what's best. That's a pretty simple philosophy. Any gender, any race, and anything and everything in between. Let's get the best and let's get things happening. But this was a really bad blight. And while the union movement here in Australia has disowned that particular pace, hung them out to dry more or less, said it's not an official Facebook page of the union movement, the reality is that it's called Union News Australia. And if you don't want it to be associated with the union movement, which is, let's face facts now, the union movement has been declining for the last 25 years here in Australia. The level of union membership of employed staff is continuing to drop. So if you don't want to be associated with a page like this, get them, call out your legal bad boys and get them to remove the name union. Because I can tell you, they're not talking about rugby union. They're talking about union news. So, and, without casting any sort of aspersions, I'm going to take it on your word that you're not associated, but the association is perceived by so many people. So at the end of the day, it's a perception. It's out there. You're linked. If you want to remove that link, get them to remove the word of union. And then maybe that perception will go away. So that's the first episode of 2019 for the Dumb Leaders podcast. It's a little bit more of a soapbox than what we normally do, but hey, someone had to do it, so I thought, why not? So check out dumbleaders.com. That was a pretty dumb thing there. Check out dumbleaders.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, like and review, and I'll see you at our next episode.